When I was with Luke in those 2 weeks with you, you felt love, you felt optimism, and the key word, hope. Team Luke, hope for minds. Everyone in that room had hope that their child would improve, and talking to other parents. And there was just this, despite the fact that what we were dealing with was so severe, when you're around people and love, it gives you hope. And I think that's really what we all want in life, isn't it?
Welcome to the Longevity Formula with Dr. Brandon Crawford. Let's explore the new era of wellness.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Longevity Formula podcast. Today is a very special day. I've got some very special and amazing people, inspirational people. Today we've got Ronda Johnson, we've got Tim Siegel. Together they've formed an organization that is just really reaching and transforming lives. So help me to welcome them. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I think we game plan this pretty well. So Tim and I are going to sit here and Rhonda's going to speak for about an hour. I think that's the game plan if I do remember correctly. But so let's kind of get into this. So I often get asked, Ronda Johnson, give me your background. Who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you doing here? Give me your story.
Okay. So back in 2006, I believe, J.D. Hartman suffered a nonfatal drowning accident, and the Hartmans live in my neighborhood in Circle C. And I heard about the accident. I didn't know them at the time, but I just felt so moved and I really wanted to do something for them and help them. And they had a group of friends and family that were doing fundraisers for them and trying to help them raise money to do all the things that are not covered by insurance to help him in his recovery and to pay bills. And so I just started helping with that. And I eventually was able to connect with John Hartman, JD's dad, and able to do some things with the girls while JD and his mom were in Dallas. So we would just do things after school together. And I'm kind of making it very short. It's a very long story, but John came to me and just said, I really want to start a nonprofit, and I have some people that would be willing to be on the board, but I need an executive director. And I have no background in being an executive director. I went to school to be an early childhood. That was my major, early childhood. I was going to be a teacher, and I had not done that. And I was working for my dad at the time doing HR stuff. And so I prayed a lot about it and decided that I was just going to take a chance and just see what we could do. And he had a big donor who was willing to put in some money to help pay my salary, and so we could start helping families. And so it started out as Hope for JD.
Wow.
Yes. So, and that was in 2011. And then in 2015, we changed the name to Hope for Minds, just so people didn't just think the money was going to JD, which that happened frequently. And then in 2017, I reached out to the Siegels to see if we could help them in some way and support them in any way. And I talked to Luke's mom, Jenny, many times, and finally got to be able to be connected with Tim. And he let me know that he was starting a foundation, Team Luke Foundation. And I told him what I was doing, and he said, I want to drive to Austin the very next day after we talked. And then we sat down in front of each other, and I showed him our application and our brochure, right, Tim? And then he was like, we need to do this together. So it was very quick. It was very quick that we decided that we would go to our boards and see what they thought. And that was the beginning of Team Luke Hope for Minds.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So this initial injury with JD, that was in 2008.
Yes,
okay.
That is correct.
And so you ended up starting that initial foundation in 2011.
Yes.
Cool. That's awesome. And you just prayed and had this put on your heart that this was what you were supposed to do. And I mean, we're going to get into so many different things, but I mean, you have touched so many people. I mean, so many people know about Tim, and we talk about Tim so much, but you get talked about a lot too. You really do. I mean, yes. Everyone that comes to us, I mean, everyone is always talking about Ronda and how amazing you are and all of these things. So just know that you're getting so much love and praise.
Thank you.
So Tim,
Deservedly so, by the way.
yes, absolutely. So Tim, you obviously have a very powerful story as well. Do you mind sharing some details about how this started for you?
So I was the tennis coach at Texas Tech for 23 years. I loved coaching. I loved developing players. I loved talking about important things in life, not just improving their forehand and their backhand. But I also loved my family more. And at the time, I had 3 young children, a 12-year-old daughter, 10-year-old daughter, and my son Luke was 9 at the time. So I made the decision to resign from Texas Tech on July 8th, 2015, and was so excited to just now take on a different role of coaching middle school and high school, not the usual path from a Division I coach to middle school and high school, but it was my opportunity to be around my children more. And was so excited to watch them compete in sports and just be around them because I love being a dad more than anything in the world. And 20 days later, I got a phone call. I was at the high school giving lessons that my son Luke was in a golf cart accident, and got to the scene of the accident shortly after. And they told me to immediately get to the hospital, and found out that Luke was on a golf cart that tipped over, and he suffered head and chest trauma, was in cardiac arrest for 7 minutes. And so that was on July 28th of 2015. So we're coming up on 9 years since Luke's accident. But I knew at that time that I wasn't not going to be able to coach anymore, but I was going to become Luke's primary caregiver. And for the next 6 years, I went to every therapy session. I drove from Lubbock to Fort Worth every week for 2 years for therapy. I did everything that I could to see that Luke would improve, because we were told that Luke would never use his limbs, use his voice, or open his eyes. He did all 3. And I know that he did all 3 because of a lot of reasons. One, because of all the therapies, including coming to see you for 2 weeks in 2021, but also because of the love that he received from me and from his family.
Yeah. I remember those initial touch points with you and seeing the connection. And like when Tim says, like he was all in. I mean, I remember talking to him, and he was the one up through the night. He was the one helping in every scenario. Like, I think y'all had some people helping. Like, I think there was a nurse usually with you, but it was
right.
Like, it was you.
Well, it's funny because Jenny was and is a nurse practitioner. The great thing about her being a nurse practitioner is she knew everything. Mm-hmm. The bad thing is that she knew a lot as well. Right. And so for me, all I knew is I was going to be a father and coach him up. Yeah. And I knew that part would improve him. And yes, we had a nurse during the day, and then we would have night nurses a couple of nights a week. But I was basically with Luke 24 hours a day for 6 years. Yeah. And in between Team Luke Hope for Minds, I would go to therapy sessions, and I would love on him and talk to him. And we had a bond. We had a sports bond. Luke loved baseball, loved football, and the New Orleans Saints was our thing. And so instead of talking to Luke about the Saints, I would then hold him in my arms and ask him one day, about a year after the accident, I said to Luke, move your tongue if you think the Saints are going to win today, and began to move his tongue. And at that point, I knew he was in there, and I had the rest. I took care of the rest. And I was so ecstatic but he understood. Move your tongue if you love Bruce Springsteen. He would not move his tongue. Move your tongue if you love Ed Sheeran. He moved his tongue. Yeah. So he understood. And from that point forward, it was a bond that we had, a spiritual relationship that we had that no one really understood, because I was with him all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, establishing communication is huge in all regards. I mean, no matter what the scenario is. And that's something that we see commonly, is that, you get this acute care in the hospital, you start going through therapies and whatnot. And everyone, especially like in the clinical field, like they start to think of communication as just the spoken word. I mean, we just recently helped, an adult TBI patient where a yes and no is established with a straight line or a curved line. We've had it through eye movements. We've had it established through head movements. We've had it established through, kicking a foot. And these things are not always the traditional way you would think of communication, but how huge to be able to have any type of window in, right? I mean, and most of the time it actually is a parent or someone that really just thinks, hey, what if they could do this thing, to communicate a yes, no.
Well, what I learned is that Luke's diagnosis was based on an MRI.
Yes.
And I didn't care as much about the MRI because they didn't know me and they didn't know Luke. And I think Luke, as a competitor, as an athlete, I think he understood hard work and toughness, and that carried over. And as a coach, I was a father, but I was also a coach, and we pushed. And I understood early on that you need to get upright. You need to be moving. You need to be out and about, not sitting in your chair and not laying in your bed. And so I talked to Luke. I didn't talk about Luke.
Yes.
And that's what I wanted from everyone else as well. And we talked about blinking, but was that Luke, or was that what he needed to do? The tongue movement was everything. And then eventually it became, Luke, can I hear your voice? He would open his mouth. Sometimes a sound would come. And then I would say things like, I love you. Can I hear you say I love you? And he would say, the same amount of time as I love you. So he was in there. He understood. He was trapped in his body, but he understood everything that I was saying.
Yeah. Yeah, very profound. I remember we were working with a kiddo and he was very much in a locked in state. I would say more severe than Luke was. And the mom, had been getting a lot of pushback from providers about, pull the plug, he's not in there. Why are you doing this? And I just said, let's just put it into it. And we put a QEEG cap on him to measure brainwave activity. And I remember, there wasn't much, and I was a little nervous, just to be honest. And, we started telling him, okay, we're going to ask you some questions. We're going to do some things. As soon as the mom started to speak, his brain started lighting up. And there was not a dry eye in that office. So, they a lot of these kiddos and adults, they are in there. And that's something I consistently want providers and families to understand. They're in there. And sometimes we just have to think a little bit outside the box to be able to communicate with them. So Team Luke Hope for Minds was founded. Can you give me however long, it can be a few sentences, it can be an hour if you want. Give me a synopsis of what you guys do. What is it? What's your goal? What's your mission? What are you trying to do?
I feel like we want to love on the families. We want to support them in whatever way they need. Some of them, I feel like most of them need and want financial assistance to help with something that's not covered by insurance, some therapy, equipment, something that they feel like would help in the healing and the recovery of their child. So, but a lot of times it's just emotional support. We have support groups, lots of different support groups that we offer. We bring in presenters on those. We have open forum where they just kind of talk about what they're, how they're feeling or what's going on. We just started an ambiguous grief support group, which, we're trying we know that they are mourning, they're grieving the loss of the child that they had before the injury. So it works through that and gives them, and I've heard some really great feedback on that. And it's with Dr. Mark Vanderbroek, and I'll let Tim talk a little bit more about him, but he was a big part of why you're doing so well, why Tim's doing so well. So I think with our support groups and just being, someone to listen, we just want to listen and be able to help them get more resources if they need that, if they're having issues with state support services, whatever it is that we can do. We just want to walk alongside those families and also connect them if that's helpful. We have mentor families who that's what they want to do. They want to step in and help another family with what they're going through.
Right.
And I would add to that when a family finds out about us, and there's many ways they can, through therapies, hyperbaric oxygen, what you do every day, through stem cell, people will contact us through that, through Facebook. There's so many different ways that people reach out to us. And when they do, and they want to fill out an application, eventually I speak to a parent. And where I feel so, I guess overwhelmed is one word, but also it's heartwarming to know that what a parent really wants is to be able to talk to someone who's been there. Mm-hmm. And I always needed that. But now I feel blessed and grateful that I'm able to provide that. I wouldn't say education, but in some ways it is, because I'm only sharing what I went through with Luke. But when a parent just knows that someone like Luke, who had a brain injury that was globally damaged, you can't have a worse brain injury than what Luke had. And yet some of these parents have been told what their child won't do, what they can't do. And so I can just share how much Luke improved based on what we did. And to give hope to families is really what we're trying to do. Giving hope through various ways. We just mentioned the support groups, but also we offer free counseling. And then our most important couple of days of the year is our Making Connections Pediatric Brain Injury Conference. That is without question the most important 2 days, because you hear from presenters like yourself, but also the connection with each of them, talking to families and hearing how they respond to each other and keep in touch throughout the year. You can't put a price tag on that.
I totally agree.
One other thing we recently started is our sibling support groups, because we do realize that not only do the caregivers need that support, but the siblings have gone through a lot, and their lives have dramatically changed as well. So we want to support them. And so we have group sessions, and then we also have individual, like just coaching is what we're calling them. So it's just someone for them to talk to, so they can kind of, and from what, the past, the people that have been talking to the siblings, they're very closed off at first. Like they feel almost bad about saying that their life is hard when they're looking at their sibling and what they're going through, but their life is hard, and it is hard to get past that. And, even if it's journaling or just being honest with your feelings and being honest with their parents on what's happening, I think that can be really huge for them.
Absolutely.
In their life. And even as they're, we've followed a lot of siblings throughout the years, and they would definitely tell you, I wish I would have done this, or I wish someone would have done this. I felt left out, so you just, that's very important. I feel like is to recognize that and be able to support them as well.
Right. That's amazing, actually. So I'm learning a little bit about Team Luke, as we're having this conversation, because I was going to come back and be like, man, building a community is what I've seen you guys do. I mean, obviously, yes, offering financial support. And I mean, I can tell so many stories about families reaching out and, needing help. And, we do as much as we can, but then Team Luke offering, whether it's assistance for the care itself or for travel or for whatever it is, and actually, helping to get that person to the office or, whatever they're trying to pursue. And then seeing gains, like, maybe we got the kid to speak or to move different or to whatever it is. I mean, and that wouldn't have happened without your assistance. But the community, it's just so transformative. We had Cody on, and he even talked about it. Cody was talking, and he came on here and he was like, man, the conference that these guys put on, it's amazing. And he gets to speak to so many people. And I was like, Cody, you don't understand. Like, these people are searching you out. Like, I cannot tell you how many people come up to me and are going, where's Cody? I want to talk to him. That pursuit of being through it, needing guidance and whatnot is huge.
Yeah.
But the siblings, I didn't even know you guys did that.
Yes.
I mean, that's amazing, because we've seen that big time.
Well, and for me, I have 3 daughters. And I was very close to my daughters, and I left Texas Tech to spend more time with my family. And then I didn't. And so I understood, and more than ever now, what they needed. They lost their brother. And so I was so focused on my own grief and my own pain and not enough on them. And so I'm making up for lost time. So I really do understand exactly what these siblings need. And it's a powerful thing to be able to recognize and be self-aware of where I lacked. And now we're doing much better, for sure.
We also have a marriage counseling. It's very important. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's very high that marriages don't make it. So we definitely want to help in that way as well, even if it's just encouraging them to communicate with each other and not take things out on each other, I think, or just isolate from each other. I think that can happen too. So that is another really important thing, I think, that we want to share with families.
Yes. So I think, I don't know the current marriage statistics, but I know that divorce is now above 50% on average. I know in neurodevelopmental disorders, So my fellowship was in neurodevelopmental disorders. So I know when I was going through my fellowship, I believe the statistic was either 80%, I think it was close to 80% of marriages end in divorce, and that's in neurodevelopmental disorders. It's higher in brain injury.
I believe I read 89%.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're right. I mean, so you guys are offering sibling support, marital support. This conference is huge. Financial assistance. I mean, gosh,
Education.
Education.
Yes. Grief support. You know, it's one thing to help the child get better,
Yeah.
and that's everyone's goal. But as Rhonda mentioned, you go through things as a couple. You have other children. There's so much involvement that you really can't imagine how much it covers from A to Z. And so we're at least able to do more than just provide financial assistance for a family or for a child who needs it. It's really about the entire family. And I guess I'm living proof of how that can be affected from whether it's come from marriage or my daughters, spending so much time with my son, Luke, at the time. I have a dad support group, and I talk to the dads a lot about being involved. It's very easy for dad to work, come home at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. How's my little child doing? And I stress how important it is to be involved with your child, and then also to take time to spend time with your wife, because especially if she's the primary caregiver, and to come home, you know, you need to be there for her emotionally as well.
Right. We see that a lot, actually, and by no fault to the men or to anyone. It's just kind of what happens where, you know, the male typically will go out, focus on the job, you know, has to go out and get finances for the family, etc. And then it kind of disconnects him from the family. And again, not by, you know, not like he's trying to do that, but we do see that a lot. Mm-hmm. So is that growing? Like, is your support, are you seeing that you're making headway with dads?
I have about 25 dads on a text and a handful each month that we talk about life, talk about faith. We talk about important things in life that don't forget about your children and spend time with your wife. My issue early on was that I didn't want to upset Jenny and how I felt about what was going on with Luke, because Luke was my little athlete, my little buddy, my little shadow, my little hero. And now he'll never talk or walk. And I didn't want to bring her down. And that was a mistake. And so sharing things with your spouse in everyday marriages is important, but certainly in this case, even more so, because you're both dealing with it differently. We always hear about how parents handle grief differently. And we certainly did do that. You know, when Luke passed away in 2021, she saw Luke's injury as more devastating than his passing. And I understand that. For me, it was not that case. And so we just dealt with things so differently. Mm-hmm. And I think you would spend less time dealing with things differently if you talked about things more openly.
Wow. Absolutely. Well, you have so many ways to help someone. So how can anyone, like, how do they get involved? What's the best way? Because I know there's a lot of people that are going to want to get involved here. Is there a single way to connect with you guys? Is there multiple ways for this support, that support? Like, what's the best way for someone to connect and engage?
Well, they could definitely go to our website. They could volunteer at some of our events or our conference. This year we're trying to do like a buddy system with every child who comes that does have a brain injury, that they have someone with them the entire time. So parents can go to the presentations and be able to not have to have the child with them in the room. And, you know, if they start making noise and they have to leave, they just don't get the same kind of impact if they're having to have their child with them the whole time. So if we can try to make that happen, if anyone's, you know, interested in, it's in Austin, and it's going to be October 25th and 26th. Always need volunteers in that way. We are going to actually add some things for siblings. We're going to have a karaoke room and do a little dance party at one of the evenings for the siblings and the brain injured children. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, but we're going to need a lot of help in that way. Sure. And of course, we need donations because that we have so many families needing our help. We have a pretty long waiting list right now, and we're not even taking applications until we get through the wait list because it was just getting to be so long. So any kind of help financially is always needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that'd be great.
what's the website?
teamlukehopeforminds.org.
Okay.
And, we're now in 47 states.
Wow.
And we've granted over $500,000 each of the last 3 years. But we have so many more families that need our help.
Yes.
Having over 60 families currently on a waiting list. And we are both blessed to be able to help all these families, but we also know, because we're so much more well known now, that we're continuing to get applications or people reaching out into our community almost every day. We used to get applications a couple times a week. Now we get a couple per day. That's how many people need our help. And so Ronda and I never expected this to be like this 6 years later. We might help a few families here and there. It's all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Ronda is the MVP of our organization. She does everything, but we have an amazing staff. Mm-hmm. We have, grant writer, social worker, assistance, communication person, fundraising person, event person. And the staff's only going to continue to get bigger and bigger, mm-hmm. because the economy does not affect brain injured children.
Right.
So we know each year we're going to have more than the year before, for sure.
Wow. Well, okay. So people out here, there is no better cause to support. I mean, literally. So on your website, so teamlukehopeforminds.org, that's how someone can connect to give, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't there also a monthly recurring option?
Mm-hmm. Yes, there is.
And that's on the website as well?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They can choose that. Yeah. That would be
fantastic.
And we raise money through various ways. We have events that we put on. We had a big event in Lubbock, or April 3rd. We had our golf tournament here in Austin. And then we have events throughout the year. We also have mission partners where we have opportunities to give $2,500, $5,000, $10,000 to be involved with us that way. And then I'm always looking for major gifts. Listen, I was a huge Texas Tech tennis fan, mm-hmm. and a Texas Tech University fan, because I was so passionate about what I did for a living. So I could ask for money at Texas Tech because I believed in it. Well, there's nothing I believe in more than this. Yeah. Not only because it was my son. And I think about that a lot, that if Luke or JD did not have an injury, there would be no Team Luke Hope for Minds, and we would not be helping families every day. And so I think about that a lot. And even at our golf tournament, as I watch golf carts drive by, knowing that my son was on a golf cart, I'm in a better place now, that instead of thinking about how sad I am, I'm thinking about that I'm uplifted by Luke, because Luke has helped so many families.
Yeah. Maybe someone needs to reach out to Texas Tech. We need to get some involvement here, right? Mm-hmm. Have they been involved in any way?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
The community of Lubbock, Texas Tech, been so supportive of Team Luke Hope for Minds and our cause.
That's great.
Yes.
That's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about I want to take this in a couple of different directions. So you mentioned, are you typically the first one that someone will connect with?
No, they'll connect through our website, through Ronda, through emails.
Well, I mean, so if someone has an event, they have an injury, something like that, and they reach out, they say, I need help. Mm-hmm. Are you typically that first?
No, we have on the website, it says join the community.
Okay.
So that's where we have our care packages in hospitals around the United States. And so usually that's how they come about, or they just email me or they call me. So I think it's me. I mean, I'm usually the one that talks to people initially.
Gotcha.
And then at that point, Tim, one of us will reach out to them first through, if it's the join the community, they put their information in, the injury details, and then we'll reach out with some resources. We've had interns who have gone through each state and done a really good job of creating information on each state and resources that are in that state. So, that's something we could share. We have a really great resource guide that but then, Tim also will reach out to a family and kind of help and walk alongside them and share his experience with them.
What are some of those initial challenges that someone is trying to navigate, early on? I hear them, but what are some of those initial challenges that parents are really trying to gain insight? What do we do? What is the most common thing that you typically hear?
Well, for me, I'll think of two things. One is, what were my challenges? You hear hey, you should look into this. Maybe you should try this therapy. And so when parents are talking to each other, financial support is crucial because how am I going to be able to do these therapies? And if I'm not doing these therapies, am I not giving my child the best opportunity to get better? I think the first thing is we all know this. If you had a knee surgery, 6-8 weeks, your knee's good. When you have a brain injury, it's the unknown. And you know this as well as anyone. We want to know, is our child going to get better? There aren't answers. The best neurosurgeon in the world can't give you specific details. And so trying to let parents know that 18 months after your child has an injury, your child can still get better.
Yeah.
Luke made his most progress in year 6. And I try to share that with parents, that your child can improve. And that's an important thing because most of the time we're told otherwise.
Yeah.
Actually, JD started speaking at 6 years at
Really?
that mark.
Oh, wow.
And he was at the dinner the other night for our golf tournament dinner, and he was talking to people. It takes him a little while you can tell he's thinking, and then he'll be able to say, he said, "Nice to meet you," to every, and he would ask what people's names are, and it was amazing.
Wow.
So I don't know if I mentioned, but he had a non-fatal drowning accident.
Yes.
I don't know if I said that, but so he, it was a blanket global injury, very severe. And they really felt like him getting up out of his seat, as Tim had mentioned. And they got the system in their house where he could be standing up and walking around. And that was one of the reasons he was making such great progress. So
that's awesome.
I think telling parents those things, as you've mentioned, and especially don't just put them in their room. I mean, if they can go to school and be at school and be around other people and have friends, and, that can be huge for them,
Absolutely.
So.
So year 6, so was there a change for either scenario? Was there a change in the therapy approach, or was it just a consistency of speech therapy, or like, what was the change that you really saw, or was it anything you can contribute?
I was asked 1,000 times, what helped Luke improve the most? And the answer is everything. And from being with you for 2 weeks and doing stem cell, hyperbaric oxygen, acupuncture, PT/OT speech, I think all of that. I think, as I said, and I've told this to many therapists, that their knowledge and their experience is crucial, but their willingness to develop a relationship with the parents and the child. Everybody knew Luke loved the Saints. Everybody would talk about Drew Brees. And so they got to know what Luke really cared about, and he would get an expression in his face. His eyes would light up a bit more. So whether it's music, whether it's sports. And so I think that's so important. And so I know that Luke improved because of everything. And getting upright. We would go to Texas Tech basketball games. We would go everywhere. And I think it was so important to get out in the sun and to be around others. I know Luke wanted to be around other friends who could talk to him. Maybe that could reignite something in him. And so we did a lot. And I would encourage all parents to do as much as you can for your child, whether it's therapies or not, but to get out and be active and be upright.
Yeah, that's great. We always talk about how important a team approach is, right? Unfortunately, I know I have had instances where a doctor was trying to tell a family not to go to do all of these other things. And I'm like, you can't be the best at everything. It takes a team. And in my opinion, it takes an interdisciplinary team. I think you need really good people on the traditional medicine side. I think you really need really good people on the what some call alternative medicine side. Like, I think that there's so many valid approaches, in both regards. Obviously, there's, pros and cons to each side. So I guess a question, did you ever think you'd be, pursuing what many would call alternative healthcare, right? You mentioned hyperbaric, you mentioned, acupuncture, people consider what we do alternative care, although I don't. But I mean, is that something that you ever thought you'd be doing?
I always had an open mind, and I was always listening and wanted to do some research. But I guess the answer is, I don't think I could ever have imagined that I would have done all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Money was never an object. I wanted to help Luke in any way that I could.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing I will say is that when we came here in March of 2021 and Luke was with you for a week and his eyes were closed the majority of the time, but I felt the love of your staff. I felt that you guys were thorough. You cared about who you were with, and it meant a lot to me. And I enjoyed being there. And then I would go back to the hotel and I would spend time with Luke. The next time I came, Luke was more alert. He was more aware. And so I really felt that week with all of you, your staff, was so beneficial. And I always think a lot about how we had planned week 3, and the week that we had planned was also the week that Luke passed away, which was on August 19th, 2021 from COVID.
Yeah.
I think I have also heard that your staff prays over families and how much that means to families. And just, I think that y'all's love for each child, that is in itself going to help the child and help the family. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It is true. We really do. We pray as a team. We pray separately. You'll come in the office and you'll see someone in the corner being prayed over. And it can be Julie at the front desk. It could be Amy. It could be Kristen. It could be myself.
Right.
You never know. It could be everyone together. It's interesting. One thing that I think we do that I think some people don't is we give God the room to move, you know? So when someone says, you know, or when we ask them, what are your goals? You know, and the most common response is anything. Okay, anything. What does that mean? Like, let's, you know, set some goals. And, you know, as we're walking through, you know, some of these things, you can just tell, you know, they're like, I don't think that's going to happen. That's too big. We're like, no, it's not too big. We've seen miracles.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seriously, I've seen kids that could not move, you know, now they're running and playing
Mm-hmm.
and climbing, and couldn't talk, and now they're talking. And I've seen the other way too, you know? So just being able to leave room for that faith to really move and to heal, because that's where healing comes from. We believe that. And I think that, you know, if you think otherwise, then, you know.
Well, I'm often asked, how do I have faith after what happened to my son? And the answer is very simple. Without my faith, I couldn't do what I'm doing.
Right.
I couldn't survive. I've had many challenges, you know, from, as Rhonda mentioned, ambiguous grief, where my little athlete now was not the same. And then when Luke passed away, dealing with, my faith has been tested. But I also know that, and you mentioned about, you know, healing, I wasn't able to fully heal, and I'm still in that process, until I forgave. I forgave the family that allowed Luke to be on this golf cart. I forgave the hospital. And that was a very healing thing for me. It was freeing. And so in order to forgive, that's how I healed. But I didn't just forgive on August 3rd of 2023. I've always had God with me when I was playing professional tennis in the middle of nowhere and all those things. But where I had God with me, but it wasn't until August 3rd of 2023 where I surrendered and I said, okay, God, I trust. And that was very important, not only for me, but for our organization, because I was struggling so much through my grief that I didn't know how bad I was until I was in a better place. And so I thank God that I'm in a much better place now. I'll take sadness over anger any day.
Yeah.
And that's where I am at this point.
Right. Obviously very understandable, you know, to be in that position and struggling and all of those things, because we see it. We see that in so many families. So is there something that you could share that could help someone maybe fast track, you know, and not take so many years to get to this place? Like, what can someone do that's in that same position?
Well, that's a great question. And that's what I hope to address in my 3rd book. I've written a book called It's in God's Hands, which came out in 2019. And then at the end of 2022, I came out with a book called Fight Like Luke, Transforming Grief into Love, Strength, and Faith. And I will talk a lot in my next book about healing. And I think that there's a couple of things. One, you can't do it by yourself. And I was always someone that, as a coach, I can fix, I can help. That's a man thing anyway, isn't it? But certainly as a coach, I can improve you. When the doorbell would ring or the phone would ring, I wouldn't answer it. I can do this by myself, or I can't have anyone around me. So I think the first thing I would address is lean on your friends, lean on your family, and lean on faith. And so I met with pastors, I met with therapists. I think it's important to realize that it's okay to hurt. The pain is severe. I used to feel pain in my stomach all the time, depending on where I was. And so that to me is number one. Lean on friends, lean on family, and reach out to your church. That's number one. Number two, and this maybe is more important than number one, that is your spouse. Share things. Don't be afraid to express your feelings, because it's impossible to have a positive marriage when you keep things inside. Before your child ever has a brain injury, that's important. We know that. And unfortunately, I'm able to talk about this despite the fact that my wife and I were divorced last summer. And we went through grief in so many different ways. And we had an amazing marriage for 14 years. The next 8 years, we dealt with Luke's injury and then Luke's passing. And I definitely take a lot of blame for it, because I wasn't there for her enough, because I was so focused on my own grief. And so it's very important to realize you're dealing with pain. You can't improve by yourself. And so I think had I been a year ago, August, dealt with my anger and my pain and my lack of forgiveness, it might be a bit different story today. But I do know this, that we get along very well, and that I care about her and will always love her. And I also know that she lost a son. And so it's very important to not only try to get help, but realize that if you are so focused and in some ways selfish, I was selfish with my grief. And I think it's important to, for anyone to say, hey, I need help. I need help. Can't do this by myself. And Rhonda and the rest of my staff at times had to deal with someone that was struggling so much. Listen, there's no time frame on grief, is there? It's not even 3 years that Luke passed. In a lot of ways, it feels like 3 days. And I have my moments of being so overwhelmingly sad that I feel almost paralyzed. But I'm able to get through it quicker than I did this time last year. Yeah. And that is a blessing in itself.
Yeah. In the neuroscience world, I forget where I read this, but it takes 90 days for the limbic system to desensitize to a trauma. Right now, that's if there's not this constant reoccurrence, right? This constant reoccurrence of this emotional trauma, this grief, this whatever, right? So that's not grieving. That's from a neuroscience perspective, for your brain to recalibrate, go through this neuroplasticity process. And what I always tell people is, no matter what, on the other end, you're going to have a different brain, period. Like there's no way of going through a grieving process or an emotional trauma or anything severe like that and having the same brain that you did before.
Right.
In a functional capacity is not going to happen. So understanding that, and just blending in, neuroscience and neuroplasticity to this story, I think it's important, because we just, witnessed a similar thing. Someone that we know was in the military, suffered several concussions, came home, didn't seek treatment. He had anger, rage, PTSD type stuff, and, didn't get any help. Mm-hmm. And it ended the marriage because, they weren't able to navigate it. They didn't know what to do. They were lost. Right. Trauma changes the brain, not just for the one that is, suffered the brain injury, but for everyone involved.
I had a friend ask me not too long ago, will you ever find joy again? And I found joy, of course, through my daughters, through my grandchildren, joy helping others. But was that momentary? And now I can honestly say that I am finding joy again, that I believe that instead of always thinking sadness about Luke, that I can be uplifted about Luke, that we are keeping Luke's legacy alive, that I was always asked, will Luke ever speak again? And he is speaking right now through me. And so I have a different perspective, but that perspective didn't come on its own. It came on genuinely trying to find ways to heal, and healing through just admitting that I need help, seeing a doctor, whether I need medication, visiting with friends, I couldn't survive without Rhonda as a coworker, but also as a dear friend. We deal with and we talk to parents every single day whose child had a brain injury. Not, of course, not nearly as many who've lost a child. And so there are two dynamics there for me. And so for us as an organization, we're just so grateful and blessed. It's both heartwarming and heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that we see this happen every day, but it's heartwarming when I talk to a parent and they're in tears because they're just so grateful that I reached out to them. That's when you know what you're doing. There's a purpose.
Right. Absolutely. Well, tell me about the 7 inspirations from Luke that you have here, right? You have this card, has a QR code, and it has the 7 inspirations from Luke. What's behind that?
About a year after the accident, I was asked to speak at my daughter's middle school. And I thought, what can I talk about that can impact and have a lasting effect? But also, I'm not going to just speak to middle school. What about high school? What about college? What about businesses? And so I came up with, at the time, 5 inspirations for Luke. And and I spent all night thinking about this. And the first one is to find your passion. I was the most passionate Saints fan, Texas Tech fan, passionate about my faith, my family. But I talked a lot about how I lost most of my passion to live at the time. But I've regained my passion because of Team Luke Hope for Minds. And I share that it's important to find passion, to have passion in your life. Number 2 is don't ever quit. That applies to everyone every day, doesn't it? I'm sure you have days where you're just so tired and emotionally exhausted, but you're not going to quit. I never quit because that little boy next to me in that bed never quit. Right. And I talk about that to teams. The third one, lean on friends, family, coaches, siblings. I leaned on no one for a long time. Now I lean on Rhonda. I lean on my staff. I lean on my friends. I share that it's important when you're having a tough day to not keep things inside. At the same time, when you see someone, a friend, a peer, a colleague, a coach, a team, a simple, hey, how are you? Goes a long way. I'm living proof of that. The fourth one is to make good choices, be careful. Maybe that's just for a select group, but it's maybe for a larger group than people realize. Making good choices. I never had a chance to tell Luke, make a good choice on a golf cart because I didn't know he would ever have been on one. And, I mentioned the safety, but I didn't know that this family owned it. And it's important in life, right, to make good choices, be careful. We've all told our children that. The fifth one was to have faith. And at the time, I talk about my faith, but faith of what? And now I'm able to express in a much more profound way that my faith in God, that I trust in God, that's important. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I came up with something called Find Forgiveness, which is number 6. And I used to tell people, I'm a work in progress. I've talked in front of 20 people. I've talked in front of 5,000 people. And I think it was last year, I spoke in front of 6,000 or 7,000 people. And it was shortly after August 3rd of last year when I truly forgave. 3 or 4 days later, I spoke to a big school. And I said, you're the first ones to hear this, that I'm no longer a work in progress, that I have forgiven. And I think it's so important. We all have to feel like we need to forgive someone at some point or feel like someone should forgive us. Forgiveness is the most important thing. And it's not based on whether someone has remorse, and it's not about someone else. It's about you. And that was important for me. And so that has really been the most important message that I have about finding forgiveness. Number 7, I added, unfortunately, on August 19th, 2021, to let a loved one's legacy live on through you. And I feel like I'm doing that each and every day.
Yeah. Rhonda, you were saying there's been some really heartwarming, transformative stories that you've been able to hear. Obviously, so many that we could recount, but you said there were some recently, right? That you heard?
Yes. So we have some testimonies that we shared at the golf tournament and at our dinner. And it's just really powerful to hear how we have changed, been able to affect a family in a positive way. Mm-hmm. And they have felt our support, not only the financial help, which a lot of times it is for therapy, but oftentimes it is, I can't pay my mortgage because I've been sitting at the hospital for 3 months and I haven't been able to work. Yeah. So us to be able to help them with those bills and pay their mortgage or their rent, that is very powerful and meaningful to them. And I think it's just having that support. It's having that someone to listen to them and to be able to give them resources. And if they don't have the capacity to make that phone call for that resource, that's what we're here for. We have Ruby is amazing, and we are trying to get more interns to be able to help her because she's only one person.
Yeah.
So, and I do my best to do that as well with her. And so I think those are the message, and two of the messages that were a lot about the conference and how impactful that was to be around so many other families and just to feel that love there, and then to listen to you and Dr. Harsh, Dr. Profile, all the presenters that are there and all the different topics. And I think so we have travel scholarships, so we're able to fly or pay for gas to get them there and their hotel, and I think that is so meaningful because they want to spend every dime they have to help their child.
Right.
And although this is very helpful to their child, they don't have that extra money to get on the plane. And so I think that is a big way that we're helping as well.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny. I know a family that conceived a child at a conference, and we're
I've heard that.
we have heard
That's
that.
their only time alone.
Not at the conference, at the hotel from the, okay, we won't go there. But anyway.
Dr. Crawford, when I talk to a parent, it may take a minute or two after I finish talking to a parent that kind of takes me back. But then a few minutes later, I'm so overwhelmed with the ability to help someone. And I visited someone in the hospital, a 14-year-old boy who had a cardiac arrest running on a track. And to sit in that hospital and to hear her talk about what's next, but how important it was for her to hear me. Just so many different stories. I've had a mom talk about a daughter in a golf cart accident. So many nonfatal drownings, all these that I hear. And I need a few minutes after I speak to them, but I feel so good about helping because there's nothing better in life, right? To be able to help someone. And the fact that we're able to help families is it's powerful.
Right. Yeah, I can relate to a certain degree. I know that, so I've been practicing for about 15 years. And so obviously with that, we're still very emotional with every patient, but I didn't realize how much this had worn on me. I had an intern with me, and this was a physician. She wasn't a student. And she spent, her first day, and we did have a lot of pediatric brain injuries in that day. And most of them were pretty severe. And I remember at the end of the day, she left in tears, like pretty much a train wreck, like couldn't talk, couldn't function. She actually left early, and she came back the next day, like, how do you do this? And it's, I guess, how you look at it, because I do it knowing that there's change going to occur. There's hope. There's progress to be made. There's, if I look at it like, okay, well, if I'm not willing to do this, who is? So that's kind of where I come from it. But then on the flip side, when I go home, I am often crying in the shower and don't even realize it, So there was a time where I was actually seeing a trauma therapist just because of what we were going up against every day. On the clinical side, we have kids, the people in my office. I couldn't go on the lake for probably 2 years. I just couldn't. I couldn't face taking my kids on a lake. Gave me way too much anxiety. I'd pretty much have a panic attack. So we had to, start working through that, which I'm better now. But, it's the same kind of thing. You're in it, and then you get to retract and go, there's beauty in this, And I did that just the other day in the office. I'm always head down, blinders on, going through cases, rocking and rolling. And I was going through the office with another physician, not one of ours, but another physician. And we got to stop, and we were looking around, and the doctor, with me was like, this patient over here, look at this over here, look at this over here. And I'm like, man, I don't ever get to do this. This is awesome. Like, look at all these things going on, that person's been with us for a year. That one just started, that one, and you get to see the change, and there's beauty in that.
Yes. Well, when I was with Luke in those 2 weeks with you, you felt love, you felt optimism, and the key word, hope. Team Luke, hope for minds. Everyone in that room had hope that their child would improve. and talking to other parents. And there was just this, despite the fact that what we were dealing with was so severe, when you're around people and love, it gives you hope. And I think that's really what we all want in life, isn't it? We have to have hope, whatever it is, relationships, jobs, hope for our children to, we can go on and on, but I think that's the most important word for us, is that we're giving hope to families each and every day.
Yeah. What's the significance with the number 3?
I used to play professional tennis, and I never hit a serve without bouncing it 3 times. So 3 was my number as a kid. My wife at the time was a basketball player, and she loved number 3. So I'm not sure if Luke had a choice, but he gravitated to that number 3 as well. And it's amazing how often number 3 is around us each and every day. The football coach at Texas Tech, Joey McGuire, does not give out number 3 anymore. It goes to the hardest worker, the greatest fighter, the best competitor, in honor of my son, Luke. I can't tell you how many times I get pictures, someone sending me, hey, my son randomly got number 3. So I always want to keep Luke's legacy alive. We have a Facebook, of course, and Twitter and Instagram, Team Luke Hope for Minds. But also I have a personal page called Luke's Legacy, Pray for Luke. And I talk a lot about the significance of number 3. And it happens almost every day that someone will share a story about number 3, but it also happens to me. Just at our golf tournament a couple of days ago, it's the end of the day. We're just a couple of people walking to our car, and I see a golf ball, and I thought it was Titleist 1, and I had one of my staff said, look back at this number, and it was Titleist 3. And that ball will be with me forever. I may frame it. That's Luke in my mind with me. It happens all the time. And so I can always remind people to never forget about Luke. But if I share that number 3, then it's even more impactful, because people will remember, oh yes, it's 3:00. Whenever I see the clock and it's 3:33, it hits me hard. There are stories, countless stories, how number 3 not only has impacted me, but others, because now they think about number 3. And it's the second most used number in the Bible.
Yeah.
It is a very powerful number. And so, by the way, March is Brain Injury Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. What month is that?
3rd.
It's the 3rd month. I used to think about coincidences, but I don't know that there's a coincidence. That a lot of these things are, in both my books, I talk about God things. Number 3 is a God thing for us.
Yeah. Well, the triune, right?
Exactly.
It's a big deal. And then the Super Bowl this past year, what the address was like, 333, like all this kind of stuff. Like there were so many 3s.
Patrick Mahomes. So what I will tell you is that we've had a lot of famous athletes reach out to us. Mm-hmm. Patrick Mahomes, of course, was the quarterback at Texas Tech. He's never played a game for the Chiefs without wearing on his right wrist.
I think most people are going to know Patrick Mahomes.
Yes, yes, most do. We're New Orleans Saints fans. Drew Brees has meant the world to us. Mm-hmm. Andre Agassi from the tennis world, a lot of famous tennis players. Ludwig Aberg, who played at Texas Tech, who finished 2nd in the Masters. We talk a lot, and he cares about Team Luke. So, it's those people that are important as far as their celebrity, but it's really, to me, it's more of just the everyday people that we touch and that support us. And Lubbock is an amazing community, how they've supported Team Luke Hope for Minds. I can't go anywhere without someone talking about Team Luke. But we want to have that same impact in Austin and Dallas and the rest of the country, because we are all over the country now.
Yeah. And, speaking to that, so you've started a podcast, actually, what, a year, 2 years ago? How long
September of 2023.
September, okay.
Yes.
Okay, so not quite a year. And it's called Tuesdays with Tim.
It's called Tuesdays with Tim, and I interview parents, moms and dads, therapists. You've been on my podcast, mm-hmm. doctors, pastors. I've had therapists on. But I think the most impactful is when I talk to a mom or dad and she shares her story.
Yeah.
And I'd love to share one quick story with you that I believe is the most amazing story, and it's in my book, and it is powerful. So there's a little boy. He's now not little. He's in his 20s. His name is Ty Marshall, and he has Down syndrome, and he had a stroke. And so we were doing therapy together in 2021 in June, and in October, the mom reached out to me and she said, my son had a major brain surgery in October and they didn't know if he was going to know who she was. And so she called me a month or two after that and she said, are you sitting down? I said, yes. She said, Ty doesn't speak unless spoken to. We were told that there's a good chance he wouldn't know who she was. After a 9-hour surgery, she walks in and Ty says, hey mom, I've been crying for you. So she was so relieved that he knew who she was. And then she said, Mom, I saw Hannah Grace singing and dancing. Hannah Grace had passed away while Luke was in the hospital. She also had Down syndrome. And then, and I haven't said it yet, but I'm about to get chills already. She said, Mom, I saw Luke Siegel with a baseball in his hand. He didn't know that Luke played baseball. Such a powerful thing for me. And it makes me emotional every time because that is a near-death experience that is incredible to me. And whenever I share that story, I'm doing that for myself. I'm reminding myself that he didn't know Luke played baseball. And then he said something that was so amazing. He said, Mom said, well, what did you do next? Well, we went out and played catch. That's the one thing Luke and I did every single day, rain or shine. We played catch every day. So that's when I know Luke is right here in my heart.
Wow. That's palpable. I feel that. Dang. So that's already been an episode. Is that recent? Like, how can someone, because I know people are going to want to listen to that. I'm going to go listen to that.
Yes, that was a recent episode. And you can, Tuesdays with Tim is out there and on all platforms for the podcast. But, when I talk to a mom or dad who shares their story and they feel good about sharing it because other parents that are listening, it's important to hear that. But we've also had, some Patrick McEnroe talk about tennis and talk about how he's been impacted. Because my podcast starts out with the podcast that touches on all things related to brain injuries among children and those who've been impacted by my son, Luke.
That's amazing. Well, obviously, if you're listening, please, go follow, subscribe, all the things, because you heard how powerful these messages are. That's amazing. And then we have your books. So just give me a little synopsis on each book. So you already kind of referenced them a little bit, but you wrote the first one.
I wrote the first one as a father, as a caregiver, and what I was dealing with. And that came out at the end of 2019. That's still on Amazon, called It's in God's Hands. And then this book, I had an idea to write a book. I had a hard time coming up with it. And I would write possible chapters. And then it morphed into transforming grief into love, strength, and faith. It's a year in the life of losing my son, but it's not all sad. It is about, we all go through grief, don't we? Whether it's a loss of a job, a relationship, a friend, whatever. At some point in your life, you're going to have some type of grief. And so I think this has been an important book for a lot of people, not just about what I've experienced as a father, losing my son, but grief in general. And, I share this book a lot. We have bracelets, Team Look Out for Minds bracelets. And on part of the bracelet says, Team Look Out for Minds. The other side says, Fight Like Luke. I always remind people the number 3 words, fight like Luke.
Nice. And
that's what he was. He was the greatest fighter in the world.
Absolutely. I can absolutely back that up for sure.
Yeah.
Well, man, talk about, again, just powerful and just palpable, everything that you guys have brought to the table. And I know we're just scratching the surface. Is there anything else that either one of you would like to communicate to the world? Anything at all?
I would just like to say that if you're touched at all, if you share our story on your social media, you don't know who might have a friend who has a brain injury. You also don't know if someone really has a charitable heart, because we know that we're raising money every day, but we need more, because we don't want to ever tell a family no. Right now we're having to tell a family, hold on. We do a lot through education, through our support services, through a lot of different ways that we help families, but we could always use support, financial support. And so if I always go like this, Luke, you're in my heart. Well, if you have a heart and you want to be able to help, this is the organization to help, because we're receiving applications every single day. So we really could use help every single day as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always tell people, I said it earlier, I'll say it again, there's absolutely no better cause to support. I mean, you see the people. These are real people. These are real stories. This organization is amazing. It's transformational. It's literally changing lives in so many different ways. So I'll echo what Tim just said, please share this information. I would really want everyone listening to get on some type of monthly giving program. I don't care what it is. I mean, we've got actually lots of people listening in at this point. So if that were to happen, it could literally change not just one kid's life, it could change multiple kids' lives, right. Families' lives. And then if there's other ways to partner, if someone out there, if you own a business or, you have some type of strategic way of partnering with Team Luke, reach out. They're always looking for unique partnership opportunities, speaking opportunities, right? I mean, gosh, I've been sitting here going, man, how amazing would it be for Tim to come in and give like a motivational,
Yes.
talk, whether it's a company, whether it's a sport,
Yes.
a team, whatever it is,
Right.
there's whatever you may need, like speaking opportunities, anything, man, reach out and just support this organization. Guys, Rhonda, Tim, thank you so much. Literally, you've changed the face of, pediatric brain injury. And I know you're going to continue to change the face of pediatric brain injury. Just listening to how you're supporting not just the patient, but siblings, marriages, everyone involved. I mean, it's quite amazing what you guys are doing. So
Thank you.
Well, thank you
so
very much. And I always like to say, to put one foot in front of the other. And that is a message that we all need to think about, right? And you have meant so much to Team Luke Hope for Minds and your support, and also what you do every day with families. I walk into your office, into your therapy sessions, and it tugs at my heart because I wish to God Luke was still here doing that. But I also know what you're doing and what you did for us. We're always going to be supporting you as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank
Thanks
you.
for having
Well,
us.
I think this was probably the most important podcast we've ever shot. So guys, please share this as much as possible. And again, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
We hope today's episode has inspired you to take that next step toward your best self. Remember, the path to longevity is paved with small, daily decisions. Your journey is unique, and every step, every choice, brings you closer to your ultimate vision of a healthier, happier life. For more insights, tips, and resources, visit drbrandоncrawford.com.